NACDL is the association of the nation's criminal defense bar.
We're going to talk to you this morning about the Colorado method, as Jeff said, and thank you for that introduction. That was very nice. Thank you. We're going to talk about the Colorado method. The Colorado method is a way to do jury selection in capital cases. It started in Colorado with David and Michael Hare and Terry Brake and some other Colorado defense lawyers. And I'll let David tell you a little bit more about how it came about. But it was when they started defending capital clients in Colorado, decided they needed to come up with a way to pick a jury to give them the best chance at a life sentence. And whenever I speak about this method, I always say, obviously, nothing guarantees success in any kind of case. But I do believe that picking a jury in this method gives you the best chance of getting a life sentence. You don't have to take it from us. You can talk to people in your state who have tried it, who've trained in it or trained it, and ask them what they think. But we have people from around the country who train in this method. We have people from around the country who come to Boulder, Colorado every May and learn the method. And we always get letters and emails back of success stories of life sentences that they've gotten in their states. Part of what I think you have to do to learn this method is to be open-minded to it and suspend the temptation to say, well, that's never going to work in my courtroom. My judge is not going to let me do that. You have to suspend that and learn how to do this method and then go do it. It is a different way of thinking, I think, because the method is designed to draw out the jurors who are inclined to give the death penalty, to draw them out. And so our demeanor and our approach during capital voir dire is such that people feel comfortable telling us they will execute our clients. And we welcome that information because we want to know now so we can get rid of them, right? We don't want to appear judgmental or in any way close down the people who are going to tell us that they are death votes. Tell me now so we can get rid of you. On the other hand, we want to identify people who are inclined to vote for life and teach those and talk to those jurors about some concepts that we think are really important. A lot of the concepts that you'll hear us talking about this morning are parallel and just like the things they talk about in the Capital Jury Project. When David and his crew were coming up with this method, almost sort of simultaneously, the Capital Jury Project is going on, and the things that Scott Sunby and that project learn as they go around and interview capital jurors after the verdict, and interview them and ask them questions and how the process went and what they believed. The things that they learned are the things that are incorporated into the Colorado method. And every year we have Scott come and train with us, and he talks about, here's what the jurors told me. Here's what the Colorado method does to make sure that that doesn't happen if it's a bad thing, or it does happen if it's a good thing. And so it lines up very nicely with the research done by the Capital Jury Project. It is a method intended because in Colorado we get individual voir dire for views on capital punishment. And so it's intended, when we do it, it's to individual jurors, one juror at a time, just individually. Around the country has been done in panels. It's been done in panels of 3, panels of 60. Whichever state you're in, find someone who's done the method. If you're interested in learning more about how to do it in your state, find someone who's done it and ask them how it went and what the process is, for the best results in your state. Some of the concepts behind the method are, like I said, to identify what we call 7s, or people who are automatic death penalty votes. Find the 7s and get rid of them. Find 3s, 2s, maybe if you have a miracle, a 1. A 1 is someone who would never vote for the death penalty at all, ever. And find a way to keep the 3s and 2s while getting rid of the 5s, 6s, and 7s for sure. So those are the concepts, sort of the philosophy behind the method. You want to add anything? No? All right. In traditional voir dire, the question has sometimes been, will you be fair in deciding to give the death penalty? And they're like, sure, I'll be fair, and then I'll give the death penalty. Or can you sit and listen? And David and the people who were evaluating when they were coming up with this, recognized how obviously ineffective that is. That we are not identifying anyone, that we are not properly setting up challenges for cause on jurors that we don't want on this case. And I think another pitfall is asking a juror, what do you think about the death penalty? Almost inevitably, the answer is, well, it depends. You say, well, what does it depend on? And they say, well, it depends on what happens. Well, what do you mean what happens? Well, did they kill the person in self-defense? No, if it were self-defense, that's a defense, and we wouldn't be talking about the death penalty. Well, did they do it to protect their family? No, that's a defense. Did they, were they so drunk or mentally ill they didn't know what they were doing? No, that would be a defense. And so you get into this sort of rabbit hole and you get buried, differentiating between what's a defense before you would even get to penalty. And so you'll hear us talk this morning about what's called the strip question. And the strip question is designed to very quickly strip away defenses from first-degree murder. So you define what first-degree murder is in your state. So, sir, in the state of Colorado, first-degree murder is the intentional, deliberate killing of another person with no defenses, okay? And then you go on to strip away the defenses. The killing was not done in self-defense. It was not done in defense of someone else. It was not done in heat of passion or under duress. It wasn't a mistake or an accident. None of those things. This killing that I'm talking about, we're talking about a hypothetical case so that we don't get the stakeout objection. Hypothetical first-degree murder case is a killing done with no defenses, and you strip away all those defenses. It's not done by someone who's insane or someone who's so drunk or high they didn't know what they were doing. No, this was an intentional, deliberate killing of an innocent victim. And the defendant in that case was convicted of first-degree murder beyond a reasonable doubt. Given all of that, what are your thoughts about the death penalty as the only appropriate punishment for that guilty murderer? So we strip away defenses. We hopefully get them to the point of like, no, we're talking about like a bad murder, bad, intentional, deliberate murder. Now, tell me what you think about the death penalty. Because very often they say, well, when you put it that way, I'm thinking the death penalty. Isn't that why we have the death penalty for cases like that? That sounds like it was intentional, it was deliberate, there were no defenses? Is that what you're telling me? Well then yeah, that's definitely the death penalty. And you're like, good, bring it on. Tell me more. Tell me what you think about that. So the strip part is us giving some information so that we can ask them an appropriate question. Then it turns into them talking about their views on that, why they think the death penalty would always be the only appropriate punishment for that person. Or, the answer could be different. It could be, well, I would have to hear more. I want to know about the defendant. So that the middle part is very open, where we learn about them, and that's where we as lawyers often have to learn to listen and stop talking and listen to them to really find out, because we're going to try and rate them based on what they say in that middle section. Are they a 1? Are they someone who's going to get kicked because they'll never vote for the death penalty and we can't save them? Are they a 7, always voting for the death penalty, or are they somewhere in between? And we rate them based just on their death penalty views. It doesn't matter what their political affiliation is. It doesn't matter who they are, gender, race, religion. Nothing matters except their views on the death penalty. Because we've also learned over time how bad we are at guessing what someone's views are going to be. We're like, oh, now this next juror, this is going to be a good one. We're going to like this person. Then they get up there and in a very nice, polite voice say, oh, no, I would definitely execute that person. And so it has to be based on their views about the death penalty. And then the last part that you'll hear us talk more about, which I think is the most important part of the jury selection, is teaching the death votes, the 5s, 6s, 7s, teaching them about respect in the jury room. And that it doesn't matter if the jurors disagree back there, that's anticipated, the law allows that, but everyone is allowed to have their own personal moral decision on the sentence, and it must be respected by everyone. Do you agree? And get them to commit. If you were here yesterday and saw that clip of the juror 17, and she's like, well, we respected each other. That's because we told her, you have to get back there and respect each other. And they did, and they let the life votes out, thank God. With the jurors we think are life votes, we insulate and isolate them and teach them, hang tough. You don't have to give in to pressure. You don't have to give in to people who think differently than you. In fact, it's your responsibility to return your life vote to the courtroom once you've decided a life sentence is appropriate, and literally how to get the vote back into the courtroom, to the point of saying, once you decide, then you tell the foreperson, thank you for all that discussion, but I've made up my mind. It's going to be a life sentence. Will you please write on that verdict form, Ms. Brady is done deliberating. She is voting for a life sentence. Will you write that and give it to the judge? And if the foreperson will not do that, that's all right. Just stand up, go over, knock on the door, and tell the bailiff, hey, will you tell the judge, juror Brady is done deliberating and it's a life sentence and she's done here and is ready to go back into the courtroom. Thanks. But it's as simple as that. And all of that is to make sure your life votes don't get held hostage in the deliberation room, like Scott Sumby's book tells us about. If you've read his book, there's this juror, Peggy, who goes back there, wants it to be a life vote, and they won't let her out. They give her homework assignments, they make her sit in the corner and think about it, write a letter to the victim, all this bullshit. And she didn't know how to get out of the room. And it's like, no, all you do is stand up, knock on the door, and say, I'm done, it's life, please tell the judge. And so our method is designed in that process, and that's why, so that when we go through this, you'll sort of understand why it is it's in that order, and those are the things that we're doing. Next slide, please. David, jump in whenever. Is he good? Yeah. This is a change. He's like clicking my slides.
When I look at the slide that's up, and when people mail me their voir dire that they've been doing, and I hear this crap, it's just quitting. I mean, it's not cause-oriented voir dire. That's what I do. I mean, that's what we have to do. We have to become very good at developing and exercising challenges for cause. When you come to Boulder, if you come to Boulder, it's a tough program. It says practice and intense for dire. But what I notice is many lawyers, regardless of how old they are or how young they are, sometimes the younger ones are better than the older ones, and how long they've been doing it, they can't make a damn challenge for cause. They can't finish it. They can't execute it. They can't finish it off and set them off. And they'll negotiate out to what I call, this voir dire is called begging. Okay? It's begging. Well, could you sit and listen? You know, I mean, once somebody tells you that they can give the death penalty, you have an obligation to believe them. Okay? I don't know where it comes from in your life where you don't hear, I'm going to kill your goddamn client. I mean, it just blows me away. You know, because I'm from Wyoming, and in my state, if somebody says, they're going to kill you, you have an obligation to believe them. All right? I mean, they're not joking around about it. But somehow, in our mixed up milieu, you know, they'll tell you, oh, no, this is a terrible case. I'm going to give them the death penalty. Death penalty seems to be the only appropriate penalty. Death penalty. And then you go and you try and negotiate it into inclusion. It's crazy, okay? That's the big problem with that. And by the way, judges are dog whistled. You know, as soon as they say, I can be fair in deciding to give the death penalty, you know what's missing from this whole question? Is murder. Is first degree, premeditated, after deliberation, meant to do it, specific intent, thought about it, went ahead and did it, killed an innocent victim. That's what's missing. You know, so they can just make up in their own mind, well, you know, I'm not going to give the death penalty to everybody. You know, I'm not going to give it to, you know, like an 11-year-old. You know, and so, you know, but they're including themselves onto the thing. Well, maybe they're going to give it to an 11-year-old. I wouldn't, you know, until they tell me they're not. And this can you sit and listen test is just as crazy. Can you sit and listen? You know, I mean, if that's the test, well then, so far you all qualify. I think, majority. But, you know, I mean, do you understand what we're saying here? You know, this is just nonsense. This is DA inclusionary language. So just getting you back a little bit to what we do in Boulder. We do the little lecture, try and get you on board to understanding what we're going to do, which is push you to do a challenge for cause. nccvd.org is our website. Don't hit the venereal disease one. Even though I don't know why, you know, sometimes they have top billing, but and it, you know, and it actually says intense practice, because we'll do stripping. Well, I'll do a lecture on stripping. We'll go out, we'll do a demo on stripping. I'll ask everybody got it? You know, it's rote language. You know, it's just read the chart, okay? You know, we've done this 5,000, 10,000 now around the United States, hundreds of thousands of times. And can you read it? And you have trouble with it because it's so direct. And it sounds like you're so mean. You know, well, won't my client feel uncomfortable when I talk about killing and death and murder? Well, you know what? Wait till they run up the body all beaten and stabbed on the Jumbotron. You know, you can't pretend that you're not going to get the shit beat out of you with big photos, murder, mayhem, weapons, and grief, okay? And I think I try and push people through that. You know, you can't sit there in this little wonder world of voir dire and pretend like everything's going to work out when the first thing that happens is, you know, the strangled baby or the butchered person on the Jumbotron. You're just lying to yourself, right? Okay, thank you for letting me rant. Next. Sure. Okay.
And this, you know, this is sort of the demeanor we use when we teach this method. I mean, this stuff is very serious to us, and David, thankfully, and all the people who go to this thing help train me. And in fact, one of my favorite stories is David offered to run me over with his car if I was having that much trouble with the method.
Thought it might help.
Might help. But you know, all of us at this program, like, we understand, we do this out of love. Like, we are hard on each other and make each other be very, very good at this method because we want to save lives. And so we make sure that people do it well. If you come to Boulder, you have to stand up and do it in small groups over the course of 3 days, and have people tell you, what they see, the good stuff, the bad stuff. When you're sitting and watching someone else do it, it looks easier than when you stand up and try and do it. That's why you have to stand up and try and do it. You can't hear our lecture today, say, all right, got it, and go try it. That is not what we are saying. This is to like entice you to learn this method in more detail, to practice it, to get good at it and go do it.
But how many people did you voir dire in homes?
2,000-ish.
Same question, same structure, same question. Didn't start talking about herself or whatever, didn't pass. Well, you heard the question the last juror had, didn't you? Well, would you answer that any different? That's called quitting, and just go home. All right, same question, same presentation, same inquiry, same deal. Thank God it worked, or else I wouldn't be standing here. But I've asked it a lot, but she asked it the most, and she got the best jury that he could possibly ever happen. So I just want to let you know we asked the same damn question. Okay, so you want to go on?
We're not getting through these slides very quickly, but
what's there to get through? We got 2 hours.
I know. Another thing is it's a state of mind when you start to do it. Like the first time I ever tried it in court in a real trial, it's very scary because the DA is going to start objecting, the judge is going to try and derail you, and the thought in my head has always been, just stick to the script. Just stick to the script, stick to the script. I'm never abandoning the script. They will have to hold me in contempt and pull me out because this is all I know to do. I'm not going to go do that. Can you sit and listen and get my client killed? So I'm sticking to the script. You can adjust it here and there if you have to, but never be like, well, this isn't working, I'm getting out of here. The first couple jurors you do are the test jurors. The DA is testing you, the judge is testing you, and you have to be ready in those first 3-5 jurors to defend your right to do this. This is not a trick. We're not embarrassed to tell people how it works. It's not a trick. It's not unethical. It is the most relevant way to find out what kind of juror this juror will be, but they want to somehow say we shouldn't be doing it. And so you have to be prepared with the case law that allows us to do each part of that. And we have that. We have a whole lecture on the law that allows you to do this. This is not us being shady. We have a right to do this voir dire. Yes, sir.
You say you have.
It is, one by one, individually sequestered. One juror in the jury box by themselves.
Yeah, but the other jurors can hear what the jurors say.
No, they're not even in the courthouse. One by one.
Well, let's move a little bit off the structure of that. I want to move to why traditional voir dire doesn't work, and it's from Craig Haney's work, and a really great psychologist and sociologist and lawyer, and I don't know what else he's got going on, but he's a smart guy. And back in the day, when I was first getting into capital litigation, it was like 1980. I was reading his works as to bifurcating juries. And their attack was, what happens if you bifurcate juries? Or should you have a single jury panel? Should there be exclusion under Witherspoon to get rid of jurors who can't follow the death penalty? I can't consider the death penalty, and would they affect the first phase? And he did a study, and he had a really good, psychologist and sociologist, and he came up with, and it just rang true with me. I mean, that's obviously true. And what he calls it is death qualification, that you get into a processing effect. And it happens all over the courtroom. How many people have tried capital cases in this room, Well, Okay, then you know what it looks like. It's a freak fear show, okay? And that's what they're doing. They're marketing fear. And they're marketing a presumption that that this guy, your local moke, who they're dragging out in his full psychotic place because all the shit that's been going down on him, they run him up on a stage up here. And, you know, my first guy got run up, and I had brought clothes for him, and he shows up in MC Hammer Zuba pants. I don't know where he got those things, but you know they run this up here. You got the judge. You know, he's all solemn. You know, all smailed up, and then you got the DAs, and they're out there, and the DA gals, and they got their clunky shoes on. They clunk all up, and then you know you're over here, and you're sitting in this panel, and these people are looking at you, and then they line up. They get the burliest damn guys, big O guys, and their little things, and they're basically selling, this son of a bitch may leap over and kill you, and we're here to protect you. Okay? I mean, it's like just the incredible, just the scenario. And what the message they're selling is, you know, we've all got together up here. This is the worst of the worst, and we're going to find out whether you can nut up and kill this guy, because bitches got to go. And that's what it is. Okay? I don't know how else to put it. And that's what death qualification is, you know? And we start dwelling on the penalty. We start making it acceptable. They tell you, you know, in an event of a conviction of first-degree murder, we will be asking you to consider the death penalty. And, you know, the people in the, and what they're, you know, it's like a dog, blah, 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 death, you know? Like, blah, 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 got to kill the guy, you know? And I've sat in the back of jury rooms and on the 4-hour panel with 300, and I've listened to them mutter, you know, tough guys, you know, solid citizens, you know, perfectly good jurors. And they'll be going, and as they read the 27th count, and that they'll, you know, the rape and murder and torture and, you know, blah, 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 and grave risk of death and intentional murder during rape. And then the death penalty, these guys are going, son of a bitch. Okay? And what they're thinking is, you know, can I nut up and give this guy the death penalty, right? You know, hangings, what's appropriate? And that's the whole deal. And that it's just like, it impacts them so fast. And so, you know, that was the state of capital murder, you know, in the world that I was living in 1980, 82. It is still the state of capital murder unless you do something about it. Because they're not going to do anything about it. It works for them perfect. You know, that whole fear, death marketing, you know, overcoming, it's called death processing. And, you know, and they get it. And, you know, somebody's got to and say, you know, well, hold on. No one ever asked to give the death penalty. Any one juror can give a life penalty for whatever reason they want or no reason whatsoever. And you have that right to do it as any one individual juror. That seemed like a good idea to me. Okay? So that's kind of how it went. But the true problem is getting rid and allowing the killers to come forward. So that's cause voir dire. So we did cause voir dire, right? Mm-hmm. And then we did our installation isolation. So this, you know, I'm going to skate through some of this stuff, but that's the processing effect. It presumes your client's guilty. Presumes a penalty will occur. And it presumes that it's the appropriate penalty, and his honor and all the solemn-faced people that are just gleeful about going to try and kill your client are, you know, have all made the solemn decision, and you're kind of on board. You're kind of on board, you know. Well, didn't want to do it, felt I owed it to him, you know, kind of like the full Oklahoma. Anybody from Oklahoma here so I can offend them? You know, I got the full Oklahoma. The half Oklahoma is where you just stand up and say, you know, I'm appointed. I didn't really want to be here, but in our criminal justice system, that he has a right to an attorney, and I hope you don't hold it against me. You know, that's a half Oklahoma. The full Oklahoma is when you bring your family in. And, you know, my wife goes to the church, and my children go here too, and I would hope that you wouldn't hold any of that against my family. Thank you very much. You know, and I'm reading this as voir dire, and I'm like, you know, that guy needs a lawyer to protect him from his goddamn lawyer. Okay, so we're just going to try and get you over that hump. All right, okay. So, okay. All right, here we go. Let's go back to what Tammy was talking about. You want to take this on? So here's your problem. You want to do it?
Yeah. part of Craig Haney's study was, talking to jurors and asking whether they believed these things were mitigating. Defendant was a drug addict. 90% did not see that as mitigation. So only 10% of the people they spoke to found that someone who was addicted to drugs would be mitigation. I mean, all the way down to 26% of people who even intellectual disability to them was not mitigating. Not only would it have been an exclusion now to the death penalty, but 26% would still vote to execute an intellectually disabled person and not find that factor to be mitigating. And so it is an uphill battle then, as it continues to be, as we all know, in finding the people who are receptive to our mitigation, who are not going to say abuse excuse, who are not going to say mental illness is bullshit, just stuff made up by defense lawyers. I mean, our jury questionnaire in the Holmes case, we were allowed to ask the jurors individually about death views, publicity, hardship, and insanity defense. And so in the jury questionnaire, when they say, basically, what do you think about the insanity defense? Jurors would write on there, it's just lies told by defense lawyers who have nothing else to say. They're faking, they're lying. And so it's still hard, maybe even harder as we ebb and flow here, to find jurors who are receptive to this, our best type of mitigation. And so that's why we think this method is so good at finding those people and then protecting them so that they are the ones who stay. And you would think that after us doing this for this long now, the prosecution would, start striking our threes, but we still end up getting threes on our jurors. Our juries, even though the prosecution and the judge know what I'm doing, they now know exactly what we're doing and why, and we still keep our threes. I think it's because the prosecution has not bought into the theory of our method. They still want to pick on, oh, that person, his brother is a cop, so I think they're going to be a good. They still pick
part
on
of the Rotary Club, or
they pick on that kind of stuff.
Identify with extreme whiteness.
Yep.
Here's the damn thing about this study. Not only are these mitigating factors, drug addict, alcoholic, background, extreme poverty, 7s, 6s, 5s, 4s, wherever they are, not only do they not consider them as a mitigating factor, they can't value them as a mitigating factor. They strip the law, the availability of the law as a mitigating factor away from your client. They think they're aggravators. They believe that, oh yeah, my client, well, how about if my client was out, got really liquored up, got on a little K, got a little wild, and then went out and butchered this particular victim, innocent victim. How about that? Well, it's even worse. So the fact that he was alcoholic, the fact that he was on drugs, the fact that that you would treat as an aggravating factor, right? That's not a reason to consider a life or to value a life sentence. That's a reason to only consider a death penalty, right? Well, what's wrong with that? He's not following the law. He can't follow the law of death penalty. He can't follow Witt. He can't follow Morgan. He can't follow Witherspoon. He can't follow Roth, Oklahoma v. Ross. He is considering supposed mitigating factors as aggravating factors. And the judge and the DA says, and they devalue it too. Well, you can sit and listen to him. You don't really have to consider him. You just wave them off. Really? I mean, in your burglary case, can you just wave off whether it was a dwelling or a business? Can you just wave it off? Oh yeah? Or if it's assault on the elderly and they bring in this guy 78 years old and he says, yeah, I'm 78 years old and then this punk beat the shit out of me, and the aggravating factor in that is that you're 78 years old, you say, can you get up and have the DA say, or as a defense attorney, hey, Old fucking guys, they're the problem. Beat the shit out of him. You don't have to consider he's 78 years old. I mean, well, since when, in what other part of the law, do you just get to ignore a legal concept and pretend that if you just listen to it sitting in the courtroom, you're a fully qualified jury? It's insanity. So for every impairment up here, I see it as a sword to get you off the jury. Because the truth is, I'm going to tell you right now, sevens don't give a shit about mitigation. It irritates them. The presentation irritates them. You read Sunbee's book in 95. We started doing this in 82. It's Sunbee's book in 95. You can see how those jurors talk about it back in the room. It's not even, it just irritates them. They're angry about it. You bring it up and they're ridiculed in the jury room. So just understand. If you think you've got a whipper-dipper mitigation package, just put her all together real good, got her all fluffed out. Well, if you got a bunch of sevens on the jury, they don't care at all. So if you don't get rid of your sevens, you're dead. I hate to say it, but it's the truth, okay? Did I say it clearly?
Sure did.
Any questions?
Nope.
All right. Where are we going to go? So we're going to do cause voir dire. I'm going to find those sevens. And I'm going to challenge them. All right? Go ahead. Can you see that?
I can see that, yeah. Right. And one thing David was just saying about he uses those mitigators as a sword, that's the difference between begging them to accept those mitigators or just getting rid of them. So if someone gets up there, if a juror gets up there and says, if that juror hears that the defendant was, high out of their mind during the murder and at all other times probably, to them, that is not mitigation, that is aggravation. Instead of like the begging that David was talking about earlier, a begging voir dire would be, well, the law in Colorado actually says that that's a mitigator, so you're supposed to consider that for a life sentence, not a death sentence. Does that make sense? And if you were to hear that, could you sit and listen? Would you listen to our mitigation on alcohol addiction? Is that something you would listen to? And they're like, all right,
if you want me to lie to you.
Yeah, because they're like, I'm going to embarrass myself if I just say no. I'm going to plug my ears and run out of the room. So they're like, yeah, sure. And then they're on your jury, right? Because they just said, yeah, whatever, sure. They're on your jury versus just accepting that answer. Right, sir, I'm sure you're not the only one who feels that way. We hear a lot of jurors say if someone goes out and intentionally gets loaded out of their mind and then kills an innocent victim, that's even worse. Is that how you feel? Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. And why not? That was an intentional act to take the drug and then intentionally kill someone. That's like bad times too. You're not going to consider a life sentence for that. Hell no, I'm not. And you have this conversation with them till you get to the point where you're like, Judge, I move to excuse this juror for cause. And then they're gone. You don't beg them to agree with you. Just get rid of them.
I don't really want to get to know sevens and sixes. Really don't want to know anything about them. I don't want to get them on the social media game, or I don't want to value them as a person. I want them out of my goddamn jury room, okay? Because I got a job here for my client, and he doesn't want them on the jury room, all right? And I don't care what their social accomplishments are or are not. I don't care how they are in the community or are not. And I don't care how many times the judge tells me, Mr. Wymore, that was a perfectly good juror. Well, maybe for your kid, Judge, but not for my client, okay? Because they're just, they're killers and they don't like mitigation and they got to go. And you've got to be very singular on this. You've got to be very relentless in your attack on them. Because I will guarantee you, I've never had or ever seen a 7 vote for life. I don't care what your case is. They're not going to do it. And then they get back in there and they start manipulating the room. So that's why we structure our voir dire to deal with that problem first. Because I'm trying to get the pile down. I'm trying to get the 7s out. I'm trying to get 6s out. I'm trying to get the 5s out. I can never save a 1, but I'm trying to get the 4s, 3s, and 2s in there so I have somebody that may listen to my mitigation, value it as mitigation, listen to my life story, and then I'm going to tell them that they have the right to vote for life and how to get out of the jury room. Simple little process. I mean, come on. You know, a C student from Ohio State, okay? You know, I'm you're goddamn right on that, you know? So, you know, that's how that works, okay? So, you know, you could do this stuff. I mean, it's not rocket science. It's just dealing with the truth. And the problem the prosecutions have with it is that I would do a Morgan question. I mean, it's, you know, if you're automatic death and you cannot follow the law according to Wainwright versus Witt, well, then you've got to go. So I just take that as a truth and begin to see how you do on that. And in the process of sometimes setting off your death views, I'll see if you can life qualify, but we'll talk about that later. Okay?
You have a question?
Question?
How do you deal with the fact that the judge is going to rehabilitate them?
Well, first of all, I attack the judge for attempting to rehabilitate, okay? And I tell him not to goddamn do it. And you know, and if he's going to do it, and then you always point out he's only rehabilitating the killers and not the life people. You know, he's not trying to talk life people in that. Okay, then, you know, and then I deal with direct. Well, you know, you told me something different. You know, I've been very honest with you. I've been very straight with you. I've been telling you exactly what I believe and what I see. I ask the exact same questions. You told me that. But, you know, when he does it, it's because he's kind of scary, right? And you want to please him, right? I tell the truth to people. It's, you know, I don't do any kind of other stuff like, well, you know, there's a situation where they, you know, they have cookies on their mouth and did they get in a jar? I don't do the Broncos. I don't bring in an ounce of bullshit. You know, in your voir dire, if a question doesn't mean something to me, I don't ask it. So I'm just going to tell you, it's pretty easy. If you just drop off all this crap and fear and just tell people the truth, look them in the eye, accept what they say, try and understand where they're at, congratulate them for being honest, you're just on the train. You know, it's not, you know, I mean, me and the judge are going to have a fight, we're going to have a fight, fine. You know, I'm all for it, you know. I'm going to make him look like an asshole because I don't give a shit what he says. You know, I'm going to tell you, and maybe somebody's had a different experience, but I have never been asked to leave the death penalty trial. Mr. Wymore, would you leave the death penalty trial? We're just going to go on without you. You know what? No one's ever done that. You know, because no one else is stupid enough to take the damn case. I mean, you got what you got, baby. You know, so it's not going to happen. You know, so, I mean, you know, me and him and it and us, and, you know, and if he's going to do that, well, I'm going to keep enticing him into error. I mean, I actually had all my voir dire taken away from me. You know, all my capital voir dire. You know, because we had to go to the 3-judge panel. Because, you know, telling people the truth, we had to take jury verdicts away from the judge, right? So we go to the 3-judge panel, and then I just get up and say, you know, how many people just listen to this whole voir dire and thinks that this is all about the death penalty, and that's the only question, and they'd all raise their hand and move challenge for cause. And we had, you know, the judge got upset. Okay, got another, I don't want to do too many questions. I got a lot. Go ahead. You just keep going forward. You just keep voir diring them. I give everybody an honest chance to lie to me. Okay, now, what am I going to do? You know, I mean, yeah, that's maybe what it is, you know, but you never know. I mean, you never know. You know, I'll prod them, but you know, I mean, you just do the voir dire. Once you do the voir dire, and then you insulate and isolate them and other stuff for respect and everything else. I mean, it's a whole package. I understand that. The case you just described is every case I've had.
So the question was, if you have a bunch of jurors you think are lying and trying to get onto the panel, I gave up trying to predict who's lying, and I just take them at what they say. Sure, they may be lying, but I can't tell. And so I take their words, we write them down literally what their answer is, we compare it to the chart of 7, 6, 5, what language those numbers use, and we rate them and we do it. And I think you just take the language they use, you rate them, you try and get rid of the high numbers and do your best.
You know, one trick, I can't do all the tricks because it's an hour, we got what?
Not a trick, it's a method.
Well, there are some tricks that you pull because it's happened to us a lot. That kind of person, if I think somebody's actually lying to me, or just playing games with me. I make him say I could give a life sentence at, that he would listen to every mitigation. I'll let him do it in front of God and everybody, and then make him say it out loud. Make him say it to me. Make him say he would not hesitate in giving a life verdict, that he could give a life verdict without hesitation, that he would protect other life verdict jurors. That, I mean, what else can you do? You guys want to sit there and lie to me like that? Say that stuff? Go ahead. But you're just going forward. Because don't forget, I'm trying to get one juror. Okay, I'm just trying to get one. And it all has a psychological play. Because as much as death processing impacts a jury, as much as 5 minutes of the introduction of the case and we're seeking the death penalty, which is Haney's death process, has all those subtle beliefs, me telling you in 3 minutes that any one juror can choose life, that the state of Colorado is always satisfied with a life verdict. The state of Colorado is satisfied with a life verdict. In this case, any case, the worst case you can imagine, any one juror can choose to give life, and that one juror chooses to give life, that verdict will be life. There you go. Boom, life processed. Insulated and isolated. Bang. And I just put it out there. I just let it go. I don't know how, people hear it in different ways. And I say, there's no perfect reason. There's no perfect reasons to choose life. I talk about choosing life and giving life as opposed to death, all right? Shall we move?
Let's do.
All right. Okay, let me finish off the principles, because this is where I live. This is what I do. I remove death jurors. Job one. I remove death jurors. That's my job. It's my obligation to my client to get rid of unqualified jurors via cause. I always pick jurors only on the death views, not on my defense, not on my demographic stereotypes, He's a hipster. She looks nice. Not because they like you. They can like you and kill your client. They're happy to. Okay? I like you. He's dead. I process for life, and I exhaust all my peremptory challenges based on death view ratings. I try and protect my record because, capital litigation is not a cocktail clink hour. It's medieval bludgeoning, all right? I mean, it's a ugly little process. And if you think that it's something different, there's no majesty of the law involved in capital litigation. It's a political crime. It's politics. It's not justice. Capital cases, death penalty is not a justice issue. It's a political issue where one person decides to kill one person for their own, hubristic or political dealings. And, when that's the milieu I'm at, I got me a son of a bitch over here trying to kill my client for political things, and I'm all good with that. I understand that. All right? And it's not a justice issue. All right? Feel free to differ with me, but welcome to that. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. You want to talk about the hanger?
Sure.
This is a hanger made by one of our great lawyers.
So we came up with this hanger to help explain and to do the process. So the first word up there, I don't know if you can see it, it says strip. So you ask the strip question. Then you begin to ask questions to identify what number this juror is, and then rate them 1 through 7. If you decide you have what you think is a death penalty juror, a 4 through a 7, so you have a 4, 5, 6, or a 7, you're going to go to your left side of the hanger, which is to begin to ask questions to challenge that juror for cause. Because if they're a 7, we don't want to waste a peremptory if they're a cause challenge. And so we're trying to get them for cause. And we emphasize practicing getting the challenge for cause. It's very important to get them off and not have to spend a peremptory on them. After we ask the questions, building up the challenge for cause, they'll always vote for the death. Life is never enough of a sentence. They won't value or consider our mitigation. We stack the challenges, get as many things against them as we can for the challenge for cause, and always teach them respect. Because if I lose the challenge for cause I'm about to make and something goes horribly awry and this person ends up on my panel, I want to know that I have taught them respect. I want to know that every single juror who has been questioned has been told about, you know, the individual decision making, and those decisions are respected, and no one should be pressured to vote for death. And then you make your challenge, and it's either granted or denied. On the other side are the life people, where we ask enough questions to rate them, and then insulate, isolate, meaning you have a right to believe that life is an appropriate sentence, and it doesn't matter who disagrees with you, that's fine. But you have the responsibility to get that verdict back into the courtroom and make them feel like they're legally obligated, because they are, to not change what they believe to be right to suit other people.
You know, you're selling 12 individual jurors taking responsibility not only for their own decision, but for your client's life. Okay? And that's how it works. And in the state of Colorado, and enter your state here, it works the same way. You get 12 individualized decisions. And teaching respect is basically teaching haters, killers, hate-tards, that's my new word, hate-tards, into understanding that it's different. You know, what's different between capital litigation and all other cases is that in capital litigation, you weigh facts, and did he do it beyond a reasonable doubt? Was it a knife? Was it a gun? Was it Mr. Mustard? You know, what is it? And you all find it, and okay, we're all good on that. But then the second part of capital litigation, which is what we really ride a hard horse on, is that it then becomes into your own moral assessment as to whether you choose life or whether you vote for death on that person. Okay? And then we start talking about how one can choose life, and one can choose life by what we call mitigation. And then we start fragmenting mitigation, explaining it's anything. You don't even have to explain it. You don't have to be able to visualize it or talk about it. Really important question? Yeah, okay. I mean, if it's something you need right now to move forward, I'll handle it now. Go ahead. Well, you know, as much as you can get. I developed this voir dire on an egg timer. I had a goddamn hard-boiled egg timer. So I can do it in 3 minutes. But, you know, normally if you're doing it correctly, and that's, you know, we teach you speed in Boulder too. We teach you how to effectively do your strip question, how to move into into identification, because how to deal with the topics that come out after you do the strip question. And then how to insulate and isolate, because we teach it rote. The way we teach the strip question rote. Okay? You do it this way. Read that faster. Do that better. Do that better. Okay? So you can get your strip question done in 2 minutes. What do you think?
Yeah, strip question in 2 minutes. To get from top to bottom, we often get 20 minutes per juror, and that seems to be a pretty good thing. And if the judge limits us, some jurors don't limit you, and you can just ask until you're satisfied you know who this juror is. But when we're limited at 20 minutes, what we would do is have the clerk tell us when there are 2 or 3 minutes left on your time. And at 2 or 3 minutes, you're obligated to make a decision to teach respect or insulate, isolate.
But
so no matter where you are on rating, like you're like, I can't get a grasp on this juror. I have no idea what's going on here. And they say, Ms. Brady, you have 2 minutes. I just start. You understand every juror has the right to make a decision for him or herself, and you just launch into this, making sure they understand insulation, isolation, teach respect.
So in Boulder, we teach the front part of the voir dire the first morning. We come back at lunch, teach the second part of the voir dire, the last part, which is the insulation, isolation, respect, and how to get out of the jury room. Then we spend the next day watching everybody kind of wallow around on identification, put it together. Okay? And identification is just normally, here's the technique. Why do you say that? How do you feel about that? Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Yeah. And why would that happen? Okay, and you know, and why? Really, what the identification process is basically, who do you kill? Why? Why is that person in your why is that person in your kill wheel? Would you always kill that person? Get them to mitigate their own worst example, their own scenario of death. And if you wouldn't kill that person automatically, who's your worst scenario? And do you have more than one scenario? Why not? What is it? You know, that's the trick of identification. It sounds really simple, but Mr. Canby, is it simple? No, it's not. All right, so what we're going to do, and so that's just a mental thing of where we're at. You know, if I'm hearing a death answer, I'm on you. You could not consider that alcohol as a mitigating factor. In fact, you would consider that alcohol as an aggravating factor. You have the right to do that. No one's telling you what to do, but you're telling me that. As you know, the fact that he comes from extreme poverty, the background of that person after you found him guilty of first-degree deliberation after deliberation, cold-blooded, meant to do it, murder of an innocent person, with none of the defenses we've gone through, not mitigation, but defenses we've gone through, that person would always receive the death penalty from you, correct, right? So these other things would be of no value to you. You could not consider the life sentence. You know, we have a structured set of set-offs. Following me? Maybe, that's okay. I'm just giving you an overview, all right? Something to think about, all right?
One quick question right here.
Because it's a mitigating factor.
Have
you read your statute? Your statute says, you know, under the influence of drugs or alcohol or extreme pressure. I mean, it's historically a mitigating factor. That's how. I mean, you know, the law says so. I mean, that's what I left out. You got to look at your mitigating factors, what have been found historically in your state as a mitigating factor. You know, Radlett has, Florida, he has 1 million of them. You know, if they've ever been tendered as a mitigating factor, under Lockett, it could be your mitigating factor, under all your constitutional law, and then statutorily, as they wrote in describing mitigating factors, if it's a mitigating factor by law, the juror just can't say, I'm going to go with an aggravating factor on that. And I'm just, hey, a lot of guys say that, you're one too, right? That's going to make it even matter, right? Kill, kill, kill. So, and then off you go, right? Back home, right? Because I wed you to it, and I reward you for it, right? It's just simple challenge for cause. State of Colorado, wacky guys down at the State House said it was a mitigating factor. You think it's an aggravating factor, right? Well, I can't talk you out of that, right? I mean, be honest with me. All right, well, you're just not on the law ball team, right? Follow me on that? I mean, it's simple challenge for cause. In Colorado, we train our lawyers from the get-go how to do challenge for cause. We don't train them on how to yippee-yap and voir dire, and ask you about your book list, or if you were a tree, what tree would it be? Just zero value, zero value. Because the law is not interested in that, okay? The law is interested, and if you read your reasons for voir dire, it's to find challenges for cause. And see, and if you're doing a Morgan voir dire, you're on track. I don't know what the objection to our voir dire is, because I'm trying to find challenges for cause. I thought that's what we were doing, right? All right, so let's go down. I can't explain all these things. It's an overview, okay? Going with the overview. Do you want to do the life processing? Because I've been on a little bit of a rant here.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
So the first thing would be the strip question. I think the next slide probably tells us. First, we're going to talk about strip. I've talked about that a little bit already. I think the next slide, Dave, has some strip stuff.
All right.
And the way we ask the question is we ask the juror to put him or herself into a hypothetical situation. Because if you ask, of course, if you ask about this case that we are here on today, you're going to get an objection to stakeout, that you're trying to find out what they'll do in this case. So what we do is say, I want you to imagine you're a juror in a hypothetical case, not this case, but another case. Let's say a case down the hall, but that also is a first-degree murder case. The defendant in that case is charged with first-degree murder. First-degree murder in the state of Colorado means that that defendant intentionally, deliberately killed an innocent victim. It was his conscious objective. He didn't do it in a hasty or an impulsive manner. These are words from our statute. He did it intentionally and deliberately, killed an innocent victim with no defenses. And then, like I said before, wasn't done in self-defense. It wasn't done to protect his or her family. It was done intentionally because that defendant wanted that innocent victim to be dead, planned it, thought about it, went out, did it, and killed the innocent victim with no defenses. Not because they were so high on drugs or alcohol they couldn't think straight. No, they knew what they were doing. They knew that they were intentionally killing an innocent victim. It's not because they were so mentally ill they couldn't form the intent. No, they might have been mentally ill, but not so mentally ill that they couldn't intentionally go out and kill that innocent person.
Right, so and in this little screen we have up here, you know, it's crazy. You can't say I want to ask you a hypothetical question, even though the court has just asked the hypothetical question repeatedly of every juror, and so has the district attorney. And the hypothetical question they've already asked is, put yourself in the event of a conviction of first-degree murder, what are your feelings about the death penalty as the only appropriate, as a penalty? They've asked the hypothetical question. But they freak out if you use the word because, like I said yesterday, they're cliche-based practitioners, okay? They're not actually thinkers. So you got to stay away from the cliches that cause the dog whistle objections to sleepy time judge who that's all he knows. Wait. Yeah, that's right, cliche. Okay, so you know, you can say I want to put you on a case, not this case, another case, a case down the hall. And in that case is called first-degree murder because I'm setting up, because I need the answers to the real question. Not what are your feelings about the death penalty, but what are your feelings? The operative question, what are your opinions about the death penalty under first-degree murder? Premeditated, after deliberation, meant to do it, killed an innocent person. What are your feelings about the death penalty for that guilty murder? And that's how we do it. Boom. Right? Yeah, we don't soft sell anything because that's the job. That's what you're there for that day. That's what's happening that day. What's happening that day is Morgan versus Illinois. That's the question. You know, so that's why we don't bleed in our facts because now you're in a stakeout, right? Now this little thing in parentheses, this is what we call a can opener. So we have different parts of the voir dire because as you're sitting there, we teach you a method of asking a question that means something, which is your feelings about the death penalty as the only appropriate penalty for that guilty murder. That's a can opener. You don't get to go to part 2 in Boulder unless you can actually say that. 50% of the people can't say it. They can't say it.
And the reason the word only is in there, the only appropriate punishment, is because you want the challenge for cause. They are excludable if it's the only punishment for first-degree murder.
That would be Morgan versus Illinois. What a wacky concept. So this is connected to constitutional law.
And so when we're training it, often what we see and what I would do is you say, can you tell me what you think about the death penalty for that person? Or as one appropriate, tell me what you think about life versus death. None of that helps you get a challenge for cause. You have to ask the question exactly that way. The only appropriate punishment for that guilty killer of first-degree murder, right? So that's why the can opener is, you have to say it exactly like that.
You know, I mean, because don't be the only, I mean, well, I think the judge is going to not like me if I'm that way. He don't like you anyway. What the hell, you know, what world do you guys live in? You know, I'm going to lose respect to the judge. Well, he's lost mine right away. So, you know, it's okay if I lose his, right? It's nutty shit. All right. So, and then I'm going to ask precise questions, and that's why we call it the stripping question. I just didn't know what else to call it. To strip away defenses. Because in their mind, when you put them on, you know, if you just ask, what are your, they love to water down. What are your feelings about the death penalty event of a conviction of murder? You know, well, you know, murder, you know, well, to them, they don't know what first-degree murder is. You know, to them, it's like, well, you know, if it's self-defense, I wouldn't give the death penalty. life imprisonment would be fine for that. If he's innocent, but there was some indication of guilt, life imprisonment's good on that. You know, manslaughter, life imprisonment's good on that. I mean, you can't have them floating around on their own definition of murder. When I read voir dire conducted and of the guys, which don't send me your voir dire, it really irritates me. Blood pressure goes way off. Wife gets nervous. But it's always the same problem. You didn't put first-degree murder on the board. You didn't put first-degree murder absent defenses on the board. They're answering a question about murder. That's not first-degree murder. It's not an eligibility question. You didn't ask, or the question of eligibility of what first-degree murder really is never on the board. The answer is irrelevant, but it includes. And you got killers on your jury. You follow me? Pilot error. All right. So I got to get in and strip out and let them know what murder is not. So I've told them what murder is under my statute. I've explained it to them. I've looked them in the eye. I've called it cold-blooded. I've called it an innocent victim. I've called it, you know, after deliberation, premeditated, meant to do it everywhere I can go on my statute. Death with a specific conscious object to cause the death of that innocent victim. That's what we're talking about. That's what murder is. What is murder not? What's murder not? Well, then we go to the stripping blocks, and we teach it in blocks. So that we're clear when I ask the can opener what murder is for eligibility and what murder is not. You follow me? If you get one thing out of it today, and just, you know, tomorrow you got to go to trial, this is it. Because if you don't have murder of what it is for eligibility on board, you are leaking oil, and they're getting on your jury, okay? All right, Tammy, you want to talk a little bit about that?
So, you know, we use strong language like I was just showing you. We do it to entice the people to tell us that they would give the death penalty. You have to make it sound bad. We do often get the question, won't the client freak out? Well, you have to talk to your client and explain what you're doing, that we're trying to set the stage so if someone's inclined to vote death, they tell us now so that we can excuse them. So client needs to know, but you're doing this to realistically inform the jury what first-degree murder is, and that's bad, right? It's usually an innocent victim. It's always done intentionally, or else it wouldn't be murder. So we go through that. We strip away everything that we think they could realistically inject in there. If you forget one of the blocks, if you forget self-defense, that's the one they'll go to. Well, what if it was self-defense? You know, and then you have to re-strip. So you have to make sure you've stripped away all of these defenses so that they understand that's really, really what first-degree murder is.
And what it sounds like. So you follow me on what first-degree murder is in the state of Colorado? Do you understand that whatever evidence you may have heard, concerning, let's say, self-defense in this case, you and the 11 other jurors have gone back to the jury room and you've heard all the evidence, and you and 11 other jurors said, no, it's not self-defense. It is first-degree murder. Do you follow me on what murder is and what murder is not? Do you understand whatever evidence you may have heard about insanity or lack of capacity? You and the 11 other jurors have gone back in the jury room, discussed it all out, and said, no, he did have the capacity. He had the capacity to form the ability to consciously, after deliberation, kill that person. So you see, I'm just taking it out. No, it's not that. It's not heat of passion. It's not mistaken ID. They got the right guy, okay? Because we've only got 25 minutes here. All right. Okay. There you go. So we talk collectively when we're stripping, and then when we move to installation and isolation, we talk as one individual juror. Okay. And I use precise language of the state statutory definition of capital murder to describe the crime. I work through the first phase defenses in blocks, because I can think better in block, right? And so we just drill you in Boulder. We just drill you. Boom, 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 boom. Where, you know, I'm sorry, if you come to Boulder, you're going to do our question. You're going to do our voir dire. Don't, you know, if you want to come to Boulder and tell me how you're doing your voir dire, it's just wasting people's time. Because really, we're just trying to get on track to teach ours. You can go home and do your own voir dire. But, you know, it just doesn't help. You know what I mean? Block 1, no self-defense, no defense of others, no heat of passion, no duress. Block 2, not a murder where the defendant was insane. I'm going to deal with the, you know, the excuse, legal excuse. was intellectually disabled, not a murderer. He was unable to form the specific intent to murder by getting hit in the head with a pan, you know, or something like that. Not so drunk, block 3, I take out drugs and alcohol. Not so high on drugs. You know, and I just declared, no, you and the 11 other jurors said no. Although there may be drugs involved, he can still form the intent. You know, I'm not going to bleed mitigation and defense. It's just defense, right? I'm like a prosecutor. All right? Block 4, not a situation where there was a mistake in identification, not a case of accident or inadvertence. And that's bridging language. I just did it for you. People have a hard time on the bridging language, and we just, you know, so whatever evidence you and the 11 other jurors may have heard concerning insanity, self-defense, inner defense here, accidental, you and the 11 other jurors have gone back into the jury room. You've talked about it, and you've decided unanimously and altogether that beyond a reasonable doubt, no, the guy did do it. Didn't infect him, wasn't drunk, wasn't insane, right? Okay? You know, so, and then we pop the can opener, given everything we've discussed. What first-degree murder is, what first-degree murder is not. And you followed me on that. And your understanding of first-degree premeditated murder, what are your feelings about the death penalty as the only appropriate penalty for that guilty murder? And I'm going to tell you, if you do it correctly, I've had a lot of this, well, now that you've put it that way, Mr. Wymore, what I've only done is describe first-degree murder statutorily and what first-degree murder is not statutorily, okay? And whatever defenses were put up were defeated, okay? And they have been found beyond a reasonable doubt. And I've called that guy the guilty murderer, okay? So you take away all the vagaries. Well, I'd have to hear what the 11 other jurors said, or I'd have to be convinced beyond a reasonable doubt. Well, you are. And then they'll start telling you who they kill and why they kill them. If you listen, and they will tell it to you in order. They will bring forward, because everybody comes into the jury room with their own little mindset of who deserves the death penalty. You know, usually it's your guy after they read all the charges, okay? Pretty much solid on that. Sometimes I'll do a trick. I'll go, yeah, even before I start, I'll go, you know, I'd like to remind you, my name is David Wymore. I'm representing Mr. So-and-so here, and that we've pled not guilty. You know, I'll go through all the charges on the charging document again, if I want to. And then they'll give me the, well, put it that way, Mr. Wymore, I think he deserves the death penalty. Then I do the setup. So a life penalty would never be appropriate in that situation. Although Colorado provides the life penalty, you as that juror could never consider the life penalty as the appropriate penalty. It would never be a sufficient penalty. And then I may go down the line, right? Yep. Okay. So you see the can opener and see why I lead into death? You know what? I don't have an obligation of fairness. You know, well, Mister, you didn't put it in life. Well, you know, Judge, you put it in 95 times. Ask your own goddamn question. Right? So off we go. So now we're going to do the back end of it. And Tammy, you know, so.
Skip this hanger. That's.
You want to skip that hanger? Yeah, it's confusing. I should just get rid of that hanger. That's the Matt Rubenstein hanger. And I love Matt, but he likes to put a lot of little diversions out of it. Okay? So what we're going to do now is teach the back end. And I've told you how to do the identification.
So the middle part, the reason we don't spend too much time on that middle part is it's so dense because you have, you know, so many examples of what a 1 would say, a 2 would say, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's too much for an introduction thing like this, but when we train in our 3-day thing, we do get into what each person would likely say and how you rate them. But we're always afraid that this bottom part will not get its due attention. And like I said at the beginning, I think this is the most important thing. I've always said if the judge told me you have 3 minutes with each juror, I would do this. I'd rather they know the concepts of individual decision making than for me to know who they are, because if you just randomly got a couple life votes in the room and they were bullied into voting for death, like, I think that's our fault. That is something we can make sure does not happen if we tell them enough times clearly how to get the hell out of there with a life vote. So, and that everyone's decision needs to be respected. And so, like, Dave?
My first part of my voir dire was installation isolation. That's all I did. I hadn't got into the attack the killers first. And I had a cop killing. And I just did the juror Bill of Rights. So I wrote up this juror Bill of Rights, which had these installation isolation concepts in it, and 1 vote for life, and jurors don't have to agree on mitigation, and you can choose life. So that's all I did. Now what? Okay, and then it started figuring out, well, this is pretty damn easy, you know? You just tell people they can vote for life, and you take all, what they call well, that's a throwaway juror follower. Not for me. That's Jesus incarnate right there. I love nuts. I love to empower nuts. I love to empower everybody. I like to separate off the hard bulls from the nuts and make the nuts famous. Okay, and, whatever it is. Well, that's if you pick life. You understand. You've gone through the whole thing. And life's your verdict, and you have just as good a common sense out of who ought to live and who ought to die as the next guy. And your own moral assessment is how you're raised. You don't need anybody back there telling you anything about your religious beliefs or who's a better religious belief or not, right? Just boom, boom, boom. So, lost my train of thought.
One way that seems to work in explaining this moral decision-making process to the jurors is to say, life versus death is a moral decision if you're deciding whether someone lives or dies. It's kind of like religion is a moral decision. So let's say jurors were sent back into the jury room and told to decide which religion is the right religion. And you have a Catholic, and you have a Muslim, and you have a Jewish person, and you have an atheist, and you're sent back there and say, don't come out of there until you decide what the right religion is. That's crazy, right? Because if one religion is right for you, it's right for you. And you can't prove it's the right religion to someone who's an atheist. And the atheist is never going to sit back there until they decide they're now a Catholic. That's how ridiculous it is to say you all have to agree if you don't. So once you decide that life is the appropriate penalty for you, it is okay to say, I get that you disagreed with me, and that's fine. That's your moral assessment. But for me, in my heart of hearts, in my morality, a life sentence is appropriate. And that is legal, and that is justified, and it is your obligation and responsibility that at the moment you decide that, you come back into the courtroom and return it, and everyone else will respect you.
One thing Sunby's book pointed out that he wrote in '95, it's called A Life and Death Decision from a California jury, is that the concept, I knew we were selling it because I'm life processing you, really hard. I'm empowering you. But the concept of it being a legal verdict. 1 vote for life by you is a legal verdict. You realize that? In the state of Colorado, that's a legal verdict because the state requires, the death penalty requires 12 unanimous verdicts. And so any one verdict of life is a legal verdict. And nobody else in the jury room can tell you it's not a legal verdict. It is a legal verdict. And if that's what you've come to, then you have that duty and obligation to return that legal verdict of life. And the state of Colorado is always satisfied with every legal verdict from each and every individual juror. Can you follow me? You think that's a fair way to work stuff? You follow me? I've got to wrap the flag on it. I've got to make it legal. Because they get back in the jury room and the herd bulls of killers will tell them, well, did you say you could return the death penalty? They leave off the other part where, well, wait a minute, didn't you say you could return a life penalty, right? They play these games. You can see the games in the book. And, so installation isolation cuts that off. And it gives them they have to understand it, because otherwise they don't. They don't understand that their 1 vote for life is a legal verdict, right? And that they have the duty and obligation to return that verdict if that is, in fact, a legal verdict. And that legal verdict comes from mitigation, Mitigation is whatever you choose, a reason to choose life, whatever you find in the case, and you can choose to give that the weight of life. Once you choose to give it the weight of life, you have the duty and obligation to return a life verdict, a legal verdict, and you have a duty to return it out in the courtroom. And also, the court will make sure that nobody can impede that legal verdict. You have a duty of respect to each other. Well, they've made their own concern. Pretty much it. Pretty simple, right? Pretty damn simple.
We also tell them a lot that the death penalty is never required.
Right.
Because since we have that 4-step chart, which I showed you yesterday in Colorado, so we have the steps. And so I think it's easy for jurors to think, well, if you get to the bottom of it, the death penalty is required. And so we're always saying it's never required. Not in this case, any case, not in the worst case you can imagine. Even if the prosecution proves 1 million aggravators, even if you find no mitigation, even if aggravation outweighs mitigation by a landslide, you still have the right to make the moral assessment that the death penalty is not the only appropriate penalty here and return a life sentence for any reason, for no reason at all. That is a legal and justified verdict. And just pound that language into them so that when they get to the jury room and someone says, I think it's required here.
Well, that's death processing. See, that's what Haney and those guys found out. They found out that it's from the get-go. Can you nut up and give death? If you find him guilty, it must be death. That it must be required, that the death penalty is required upon a finding of guilt. If you don't handle that, if you don't, because no one's going to do it for you. No one's going to do this for you. You got to do it. You can't hide from it. You got to ask yourself, can I nut up and get this stuff done, right? Because that's where the game is. And so, tacking it onto the language, when we do our salvos of insulation and isolation, our first one, as you understand in the state of Colorado, the death penalty is never required. In this case, in any case, in the worst case you can imagine, it's never required. The state of Colorado is always satisfied with a life verdict. Because what am I dealing with? I'm dealing with the impact of processing that happens from the introduction of the death penalty and what Haney has studied. You just take what these sociologists and these people have studied and you just use it. That's all this is attacking the worst and doing it. And then telling them you can give life, right? Mm-hmm. All right, so this is my old Juror Bill of Rights deal. Right, decide for yourself. This was my original voir dire, 1983. I read a case and it said, we had a case, and it said, the jurors in Colorado in death case have a right to know the consequence of their verdict. I go, well, that's good. I can go with that. And that one vote for life is a life verdict. I don't like to read cases that are bad for me. I read cases that are good for me. That way it limits my obligation of contrary authority. And, I know what that one says, that's C-student work right in there. And that's what it said. So I just went off on it, okay? Now I'm just showing it to you. Decide whether the person lives or dies, individual vote to give life. And, I did call it, and I still call it, you can call it insulation or Bill of Rights, or the rights you have as a juror. You have rights as a juror in a death case. You know what jurors love to hear? Because they're kind of always lied to and moved around and told when to go. You tell somebody they got a right in a case to give life, to decide for themselves whether it's appropriate verdict, use your own moral assessment, your own walk of life, people buy it. That's why they hate this voir dire. Because they got to cattle them up, terrorize them, bewilder them, right? Just get that big, that blue suit and that red tie on and solemn face and strutting around up there, that kind of nonsense, right? They've got to overpower them. They've got to fear them up. All right, so off we go. Find mitigating factors. I got to tell them what it means. You know what a mitigating factor is? A reason to choose life or a reason not to choose death. Don't go any farther. Don't go anyplace else. Don't be talking about making drawings, playing the fiddle. Don't be talking about nothing like that. Each individual juror decides for themselves what is mitigating, and it can be anything you choose. And if it's a mitigating factor for you and you choose to give it the weight of life, you have the obligation to return life verdict. Boom, boom, boom. Got me? Boom, boom, boom. All right? Okay, so this is it. You can give, I got to tell them that no matter how many aggravating factors they found, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. The one little mitigating factor you find that nobody else can even understand, that you have no obligation to even defend or explain to. But if you know in your heart it's that mitigating factor, come from the whole case, whatever you look at, within the case, you can say, yeah, I can't really explain it to you, but I'm going to choose to give that feeling. And Sister Helen has some nice language on it. It's like a feeling of that I'm choosing life. And if I choose that, and because I have that feeling, I choose that, and that's mitigating for me, I can give it the way to life. Then you just start empowering them out the door. Got me? It's very nice for a dyer. It's not, it's very, you're not yelling at them or begging them. You're just telling them. But you got to deal with the stacked aggravation versus mitigation. You got to empower one mitigating factor they can't explain by way of non-unanimity of it. You got to move it out, right? And then we do respect. Because, I understand how that works. It's called bulldogging, I mean, DAs actually have been filing motions now to inform the jury that, yes, I think in Arizona, anybody from Arizona? Spectacularly stupid state in terms of litigation. They've been filing motions to tell the jury that, yes, you can bully and overbear people. Really? It's like, go ahead, file that motion. Because I'll be talking about that, because that's really not what deliberation is. Deliberation is not berating, bullying, intimidation. Deliberation means to think deeply about something yourself and come to a conclusion. It doesn't mean fighting. It doesn't mean bullying. It doesn't mean little jobs or incrimination. And then I change it a little bit too. There's another thing. I tell them, if you found it's a life verdict, if you found that for you it's a life verdict and you've deliberated on that and you've thought about it and and in your mind you know the weight you're going to give that mitigating factor is life and you've heard everything else, do you realize at this time that is a legal verdict and everybody else is a holdout for death? They're the holdouts. You're not the holdout. They're the holdouts. And you don't have to listen to the holdouts for death.
Okay.
What is that? Okay. Was that me or did everybody else hear it?
Yeah.
All right. Never know about the tumor. And so you just classify. You don't give power to hateards in the jury room. You take power from the hateards, right? They just call me, they're holdouts for death, They want to be there all day, yelling at you. You don't have to put up with that shit. Walk out. That's what we call teaching them how to walk out of the courtroom. All right, so why don't you go on do you want to do the steps? These are the conceptual steps, but you've got 15 minutes. I think it's of value.
Yeah.
All right.
So we use the language that David was just talking about, like he said, to take care of all they've heard about is death, death, death. And so we're going to start telling them, empowering them for a life verdict. Introduction to mitigation to life givers. And so we tell them, mental illness, you might hear mental illness mitigation, and some jurors tell us, if they heard mental illness mitigation, that would be the kind of mitigation that would cause them to vote for a life sentence. And the law says that's okay, that's good, that's what you're asked to do by the law. And so if you hear mental illness and you find it to be mitigation, and for you, that carries the power of life. If the other 11 jurors say, we don't care about mental illness, we don't even think he's mentally ill, the law says that's okay. It's okay to find for yourself and weigh for yourself mitigation in the case. And so you give them this language and these concepts and tell them how to go through the process and get out so that they aren't held back there, as we've said. The right to deed and respect with the jurors, if they're like a 4, 5, 6, hopefully you've gotten rid of the 7s, but certainly a 7, you're talking to them about, sir, would it surprise you if you get back in that jury room and people disagree, you know, and for you, you might determine that the death penalty is appropriate in this case. But the juror sitting next to you says, no, you know, I've given this a lot of thought, and for me, in my heart of heart, a life sentence is appropriate. Now, you'd expect your decision to be respected, right? And likewise, you'll respect that other person's decision. So if there's someone back there who thinks that it should be a life sentence, and in Colorado, if one person thinks it should be a life sentence, it is going to be a life sentence. Are you going to respect that one person and allow them to go back into the courtroom and return that verdict? Because that's what the law says.
You know, it's all Vegas rules. And we know Vegas rules, right? Go big or don't go at all. You cannot tippy-toe around. You cannot marginalize yourself. You know, it's not a $1 bet, okay? It's go big or don't go at all. Because it's not going to win for you from being equivocating and all these other things. And so with the steps for installation, I want you to conceptually understand how we're going to do the rote language and why we do the rote language in the way we do the rote language. And so, you know, because I'm just trying to teach you a fundamental in Boulder, and then, you know, I can't control what you do when you go, you know, wailing out. I can tell you, don't give my shit to the prosecution. I can tell you that. I can remind you of the movie of Unforgiven and what happened at the end with Miller Money. But, you know, I mean, you know, because no, you don't have permission to give my shit to the prosecution. Okay, no, thank you. Take care of the processing effects. That's the worst thing. The studies say that's the worst thing. Empower the life givers. Introduce mitigation because they don't know what it is. Stress unanimity. Explain it. Effective mitigation, the right to give the weight, attach weight. Jurors' obligation, once they found a mitigating factor, attach the weight. What's your job now, Mr. Juror? What's your job now, Mr. Juror? Okay, you found it. Well, it's not taking shit from hate-tards, and it's getting your life verdict out, right? You got your obligation. You took on a responsibility. You know, I'm qualifying you. You know, you said you could do it, you could do it, you could do it, right? You got a job. Let's get it done. Without hesitation, and teach respect, and get the verdict out.
That's why I like that clip of that juror that I showed yesterday, because she was a death vote, and yet she was explaining, so she's explaining to the reporter, we went back there, we deliberated the whole time, and we were very respectful with each other, and at one point, there was one person that just couldn't do the death penalty, and there were two others who weren't sure, and so our understanding is at that point, there's no point to continuing on. She had made up her mind. Two others were close to making up their mind in that direction. So our understanding was we just come back into the courtroom. There's no point to further deliberations. Like she heard and incorporated that language, and that is how it went back there. Versus, you know, think how bad it could have been if they didn't know that. If they thought they had to reach a death verdict, and I mean, I can't imagine how awful it would have gotten back there, but they accepted these concepts. And again, I think part of it is because we say it so many times, like we do up here. There's benefit in hearing us repeat this language over and over and over, because then you adopt it and you can it just spews out of your mouth. And then you say it a lot to the jurors, and then the jurors adopt it and say it back there in the jury room.
It's life processing, right? You know, and then and what's interesting about the clip? First of all, when they came out, in Holmes' case, all the Holmes prosecution team, they had their little best dress uniforms on so they could go out and look. You know, didn't want to do it, felt owed it to them. They had their big thing going. And then she comes out and says exactly the same language we hear all around the country. You know, Carrie sent me a clip from Louisiana when they won their case down there. This mass, rapist, right? Rape murder guy? Serial killer and rapist. Okay, they broke Channel 9 News break. Life verdict. I mean, they were like, what the shit? You know, I mean, it's raining mud. You know, so... And they come out and they say the same thing, don't they, Carrie? You know, it's what I'm just trying to say, the concept of talking about the law and the rights of jurors and telling them directly and with power and conviction how it works, all right? So we're going to pop now to just like everything else, when you teach a method, you teach it in blocks. This is how it goes. Installation block 1. What was block 1? Take care of the processing effects, right? This comes out of your mouth first. Colorado never requires a death verdict in any case. Why? Why is that first? Because that's what the processing for death does. Not in this case, any case, worst case. Always satisfied with a life verdict. This case, any case. Block 2. Any one juror can choose life, and the verdict will be life. I would add a legal verdict onto that now. But I don't get around to typing much. Okay? How that works is called mitigation, right? It's a legal term, meaning anyone, because the juror's like, well, that all sounds good, Dave, but how do I get there? I understand it doesn't require it. I understand, but how does one person like me gain all this power? How does one person like me gain the power of the Supreme Court? Gain the power of life? How do I do it? Well, this is a little thing called mitigation. There it is. That's how. You know? And it comes from your individual, unique walk of life. That's where I go on with no one has the perfect common sense out of who ought to live or who ought to die. You know, the banker or the politician or the lawyer or the psychologist or the United Airlines pilot who think they all know who ought to live or die. None of these people, it's the same person. Your common sense is just as good as theirs. And they determine for themselves what mitigation is. Can you do that, Miss?
Yes.
And you understand it's your own moral determination to choose life or not?
Yes.
You understand that it doesn't have to be unanimous. And you don't have to explain why you choose life. No one else gets to vote on your own moral assessment. Does that sound fair?
Yes.
It's coming from your own religious walk of life or what your parents taught you, how to live your life and, what life means to you, right? Does that sound fair to you?
Yep.
Okay, and you following that and you can do that as a law?
Yep. And the reason he asks those little checking questions, like, are you with me? Does that make sense? Is to stave off the objection that you're not asking questions. In the strip part and in the back part, whether you're teaching respect and insulation, isolation, we'll say, don't forget to check in. What that means is say, are you with me? Does that make sense? Good. So that they can't say, she's talked for 3 minutes and not asked a single question. Actually, I am. I'm seeing if they're with me on those concepts and have any concerns about it.
Okay, 5 minutes. So we're going to go block 5. Should you, as a juror, anyone determine you found a mitigating factor? Ma'am, do you understand you have, if you found that one mitigating factor, you have the right to give that one mitigating factor the weight of life? Do you follow what I'm meaning there?
That sounds great.
Yeah, it's just, it can be a little something to you, but it's that feeling of life. I'm feeling to choose life. And you have the right to give it the weight of life. By weight of life, mean nothing else matters. I've heard all the aggravation. I've heard all the arguments. I've weighed all that stuff. I've considered all, but I'm going to choose to give that one mitigating factor the weight of life. You understand that's what the law allows you. That's the right the law gives you as being a juror on a death penalty case. You following me on that?
Yep.
Do you think you could follow that law?
Yes.
You think you could affect that law?
Yes.
All right. And regardless, went through regardless of anyone, do you understand nobody else has to agree with you that that's a mitigating factor.
Okay.
It's your own. You can look in the case. You can find it yourself. You're not limited by what I say. You're not limited by what the family comes in and says. You're not limited by what the prosecution says. You're not limited by anything. You can investigate the case for yourself and find out, that's a mitigating factor to me. No one has to bring it up to you. That's the right the law gives to you. You feel comfortable with that?
Yep.
Feel a little more comfortable now than what you thought was going to happen in this case?
Yep.
All right. Well, you're following the law. Okay, mitigation 6. Doesn't have to be unanimous. You don't have to explain it to anybody. You owe nobody an explanation as to what it is. Can you follow that?
Yep.
And vice versa, people don't owe it to you. Do you know that?
Yep.
Could you follow that? Well, I want to hear what you have to say. They have a right to their own common sense, their own walk of life, and their own choice of what a mitigating factor is, right?
Yep.
People have a different capacity or ability to explain their feelings or what they are. But the law allows that. Because each individual juror takes responsibility in this case for them as an individual juror and the life or death of this person. Do you think that's fair for a juror that's being asked to consider whether it's life or death or to choose death? I mean, not choose death, choose life or to punish by death. Do you follow me on that?
Yeah.
I don't want to be a death processing motherfucker, so.
And since I think we're done, our time's up, but I always like to end, if it's a life juror who I think is up there, I always like to get a commitment from them. Like, so, if you go back there and at some point you determine that a life sentence is appropriate in this case, will you commit to returning that or
I don't use the word commit.
Commit. That's why I stopped, because you'll draw the stakeout objection. But once you understand you have the right, duty, and obligation to return that verdict to the courtroom, and do you think you can do that in this case? And sort of without saying
well, it's
commit.
not commitment. You say,
Yeah.
do you think that you could fulfill to yourself what you believe you should do? We work with language there. Okay, go back to moral assessment, weight of life, how many aggravating factors, anybody agrees with them, block 8. Then we go through respect, and every defendant has a right to have 12 individual moral assessments and have them heard in the courtroom. That's what the law is asking you to do by sitting under this. Each individual juror has a right, duty, and obligation. So now I'm into right, duty, obligation. Right, duty, obligation to see that their individual moral assessment is heard in the courtroom. Right, duty, obligation. Can you fulfill your right, duty, and obligation without hesitation should you sit on this case? All right? And the right to knock on the door and inform the judge of your decision once you've come to that decision that it's a life verdict, it's an appropriate penalty, a legal penalty for you. You can get up. You don't have to listen to the hate charge. You don't have to listen to the holdouts for death. They've had their opportunity. You can knock on the door and say, "I've got a verdict for life. Could you do that?" You understand you have that power to do that. Will you do that without hesitation should you reach a life verdict? All right, and follow and be fair. All right, that's all we got. Thank you very much. You're lightly informed. There you go.